Welcome to Define, the podcast about the moments that shape us. I'm your host, Maddie, life coach, yoga teacher, and curious soul. Each episode, I speak to someone about a defining moment in their life, the kind that flipped their world upside down, cracked them open, and led them on a journey they never expected. This isn't about headlines or hero stories. It's about real life, real shifts, and what it takes to rebuild after the break. So let's get into it. Hello. So welcome to Define, Luke.
Happy to be here.
We're going to pretend we've not had a natter for like an hour and a half before I hit record. And so, yeah, how are you feeling?
Getting used to my newfound freedom, trying to suss out next steps. Exciting, scary.
I always like to start with like how we know each other, but I think for us, that's an interesting one. Yeah. So how do we know each other?
So you are my sister, 3 years younger with the same birthday.
Yeah, that's always my fun fact. Like if I come into a new group or community, it's always my fun fact.
I'm a twin, but you'll never guess what else.
Yeah. Are you triplets? How is this relation? But yes, so yeah, you're my brother, not my twin, but a shared birthday. Yeah. And you've kindly offered to come on today as a bit of a guinea pig, but also hoping that this might go out into the world eventually as I kind of step into this new space of being Maddie, the podcast host, as well as the other various hats that I wear. So welcome. How do you feel about coming into a space where you're going to talk a bit about a defining moment in your life?
On the surface, fine. I was talking with G the other day and I was like, I'm not sure if I have a defining moment. But then we were talking about it and yes, I probably do. I just don't necessarily see it as a really, like, it's a defining moment, but then it's like, what is a defining moment? What sort of parameters that need to fill to be classified as defining? So I think maybe it was me kind of saying I don't have anything defining, but I think thinking about it, I've definitely got something which is changing the trajectory of my life, I'd say, as opposed to necessarily changed. I think it's a process which is still happening.
I love that question that you asked yourself of like, what is a defining moment? And that is exactly why we're here, is what is defining for one person could be totally not for another and vice versa. And I think that is where the joy and the intrigue is of it's totally personal to you. As you even said, defining moments for some people that could be in a minute. Their whole life could be defined by something. Also, a defining moment could be a whole chapter of your life. And so seeing as we're kind of in this moment of talking about define, I wondered if you could share with us or give us a little sneak peek into what you feel your defining moment is.
The decision or the thing which is defining my life at the moment, or at least the trajectory it's on, would I say is taking up running. It would be foolish of me to try and convince myself that it hasn't changed the path my life is on.
Obviously, I have the benefit of knowing you and knowing what type of running you do. But for the benefit of those listening, what kind of running are you involved in?
I enjoy ultramarathon distances. Anything longer than a marathon is classed as an ultramarathon, typically starting from 50 kilometers upwards and onwards relatively exponentially. I think they go up to sort of the 300-mile mark in America where they've got room for you to run that far. You get into the realm of FKTs, fastest known times, which are done on established trails, which obviously can span the length of countries and continents and things. So it can go a very long way. But yeah, for me, I prefer the longer stuff, 100K, 100 miles upwards. I'm going to venture further, but I haven't done it yet, so I can't say with full certainty.
And I love the casualness of how you just say 100K and 100 miles. And I think in the realm that you're in, that is a comfortable distance. But I think for the majority of the population, what does 100K, what does 100 miles even look like? That is, a huge, huge expanse.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. And there's often a conversation I have with friends of mine who also run, even if not those kind of distances, but they've, covered marathons and things like that, or they just run regularly. It's sort of the normalization of running in general. But certainly when you start to get past a marathon, it's a long bloody way as it is. Anyone who's run one will attest to that. Yeah, I think when you move in those circles and you have friends who have similar hobbies and stuff, there is a normalization of it. Sort of you speak of it more casually. 100K I guess for context for people listening, there is a race where you can run from London to Brighton, which is 100 kilometers. That gives a bit of context. It's 2 marathons and a bit more. 100 miles is about 4 marathons back to back, all in one continuous go. What that looks like, I think, really varies, because the thing about ultra running, trail running, is terrain and elevation profile and stuff, weather, all that kind of stuff plays such a role in how difficult or how long a race might take. I've done 2 100-mile races so far. The difference in time between the two of them was 16 hours. And that's simply just because of how runnable it was, how difficult it was. There's a lot of factors.
And I really want to get into like, there's so many questions I'm getting excited and want to ask you about what I've seen, as your sister come in to be like a huge part of your life. But if it's okay, we'll pause for a minute and talk about life kind of before the shift, before the defining moment. What was life like before running, and when did you come to running?
I came to running during COVID, second year of COVID. I'd always exercised a lot. As you know, it's always been a big part of my life, often forming a large part of my working life as well. Before running, I did martial art for 12 years. That kind of reached an end point, and I moved abroad for a year, and then for various reasons came back. Managed to come back about a week or 2 weeks before the first lockdown in the UK. And then, yeah, it was just, I think after a while of being locked down and the kind of novelty of not working and just being cooped up wears off, and you're kind of looking for a way to exercise, which doesn't require a gym or an entry to somewhere that you can do on your own because you can't meet anyone, and I think it was, you were running quite a bit at the time, and that sort of popped into my head and off I went. That whole period of time, I think, changed a lot of people's lives in general. And I think with me sort of moving away and then coming back, I think what life looked like before to after feels a bit difficult to answer, as opposed to if I'd just been trucking along in normal life and suddenly taken up running. COVID was probably a fairly defining point in a good and bad way for many people. And I think a lot of people, certainly that I've met, took running up in COVID as well, because it was one of those accessible ways, and you were allowed to do it, and you're allowed to spend time outdoors, and you could do it on your own, and it was just needed a pair of shoes and off you go, at least to begin with. It gets expensive once you get into it. I think initially it was just looking for one form of exercise to replace another, which was, it kind of run its course, but was also not accessible at the time.
So I hear you, like it's coming out of this space of like a huge transition in your life, I suppose, like living abroad. You were living over in New Zealand, and then suddenly you were coming back to the UK, landed, you're in London, we're locked down, seeking out this form of exercise, like you said, it's this simple thing that you can do to begin with, before you get into all the kit and these complex races, but this simple thing that you can just get out and do on your own safely. I hear you. It was like this massive source of support for people throughout the pandemic. It was this sort of lifeline that has gone on. We can see like the mainstream of running, how mainstream it's become in ways, and run clubs and social run clubs all being born out of this time, which is, I think, like totally incredible way for people to connect with each other, but also with themselves and with fitness. And you were saying, there was this element of like, it was great for fitness. Was there anything else? Was there, anything else you were getting out of it as you began that journey?
It was a way to spend more time outdoors. But I think exercise has always been an outlet for me. I feel better when exercising. It's time to myself, time inside my own head, without all the noise of normal life and responsibilities and stuff. It's 30 minutes or nowadays potentially a few hours, to yourself, especially when you're out on the trails. I don't listen to music, you just sort of let your mind wander, enjoy where you are, be in the moment. Yeah, it's a way to kind of just process things and just, sounds a bit cliche, but like be at peace in a way. Life can be quite a lot sometimes. And I think for me, when running, most of the time you can kind of switch all that off and you just focus on running and enjoying it and just kind of being out there and doing it.
I love that. Like being in the present moment, you're not even listening to music, just absorbing your surroundings, focusing on getting one foot in front of the other. That is just so, I can really relate to that. It's just so immensely powerful. And, recognizing that running isn't for everyone, but it's all of those qualities you've just described. It's finding that, for yourself. And so tell us, like when you first got into this running during the pandemic, How kind of long were you getting out for? What was were you on the roads? Were you?
All road initially. Right at the beginning, I'd spent so long saying I hated running because I was made to do like cross country and track. And I sort of never really felt like I had a choice. And then as soon as I did, I dropped it all and then kind of never ran since, really. So like first 2 weeks, I just went out every day, whether it was for like 5 minutes or 20 minutes. I just forced myself out the door. And then that sort of started to form a bit of a routine. So then I dropped down to like 3 days and started to try and structure a little bit more. But yeah, just on the roads, various parts has kind of moved around a lot in the beginning of COVID, but was living near the canal, Angel Islington area. So I would run down the canal to Victoria Park a lot. Yeah, starting with 5Ks, building up. First time I did a 10K, I ran 5K to a friend's house, had a long old sit down, and then ran 5K home. And that was my first 10K. But once I'd done it, then the distance became achievable. It's actually quite funny because I remember speaking to Jamie when he lived in London and I went to visit him near the river somewhere east kind of way. I think he'd run a few half marathons at the time. And I remember telling him that, I was starting running and stuff. And he was saying like, wait till you get to the longer distances. Like there's something about that that's so kind of enjoyable. And at the time I was like, no, quite happy with the kind of shorter stuff. But I often think about that moment and think about like the kind of distances I want to run or try and run now. And it's just quite funny how we can progress down that journey. You don't know until you try. And,
I love that. You don't know until you try. And so, you're speaking to your friend and there's almost this, you can notice that difference between the moments when you were getting out for maybe 5 minutes or 5K and suddenly shifting towards these bigger distance. So if you take us, and I know you talked, there's not a defining moment in terms of like one day. How did things step change for you going from that to moving towards where you are now?
So initially taking up running was the first step, I'd say, in that journey. I'd say the second was the first race I ever did. It was Vitality Big Half, first big race out of COVID, 14 and 15,000 people. I mean, it was tough, but I just really enjoyed the experience. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I went down a rabbit hole about ultramarathons on YouTube and decided that's what I wanted to do next and booked one, Race to the King by Threshold Events, 100K. And I went into it so naive, but it was great. Like I had such a great time. I couldn't walk after for like 3 days. I made the mistake of sitting down on the floor once I finished, and it took my brother and my dad to pick me up again. Otherwise, I'd probably still be there now. Yeah, and I think it was that jump, that kind of naivety to just be like, that sounds really fun, give it a try, without worrying too much about like what it actually involved or really thinking about exactly how far it was or exactly what the training needed to look like. I just was running and running regularly and running consistently, but there was no structure. I was just getting out often, and I think that was the best thing I could have done. Like, I think sometimes jumping up to a bigger distance, kind of an element of naivety is quite helpful. I don't think I do that now, but at the time it worked very well.
God, I'm so excited hearing you talk about this, and you're being modest because I'm pretty sure you also won that race, that first 100K that you did, right?
I got the fastest time on the day, yeah. I mean, it was fluke and it was luck and it was just circumstance of who turned up on the day. And that was like the year after COVID had finished and stuff and things like that. And I think
you're being modest. I still think an incredible achievement, like regardless, huge event after coming out of COVID is really, really brave and really incredible. Interesting you talk about naivety and how you just kind of went with it and you weren't kind of following this super structured plan. Obviously, I'm sure there's an element that you look back and you think, oh God, like I would do things, differently as you train now. It reminds me of coming in from our comfort zone into our stretch zone. And so many people would stay in their comfort zone. I've run a half, I'll run another half, or maybe I'll go for a marathon or something. I think there's something so incredible and speaks so much to your personality and bravery to just jump into that stretch zone and go like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't necessarily even equipped with the full knowledge I need, but I'm just going to do it anyway. I just want to recognize that and notice that maybe if you hadn't have done that, you wouldn't be at the point you are now, or you maybe wouldn't have got there in the way that you have and maybe as quickly as you have. So just noticing that that stretch zone is like an incredible space for yourself and people to expand what they do, expand their horizons.
Like I said, I would never approach another race, certainly a race distance I haven't covered before, in the same way. But I do think, having done that and survived, it gives me the confidence to look at something else that I haven't done before that's difficult within a running context and go, well, why not? Because I think like the great thing about ultras is obviously whenever we enter a race or a competitive situation, we always want to do as well as we can, of course. But I think with ultras and compared to road racing is like, it's so much just about the journey as well, like the accomplishment. Even 100K can, the elites might do it in 8, 9, 10 hours, depending on the terrain, but you'll have people out there for 14, 16, 18, depending on the race, 21 hours. It just becomes so much more about like completing that, because the kind of the battles you have to undergo with yourself and the terrain and the weather and all this kind of thing can be quite immense in comparison to a road race like a marathon, which, could take 5 or 6 hours. There are often city based, there are always spectators around. The long races can be very isolating. I like being out there in the middle of nowhere on my own where only your feet can take you. And sort of it's part of the thing I relish about these races, but it's an adventure. Completing that adventure in the best way you can on the day or the 2 days or however long it takes is so much a part of ultra running, at least for me anyway.
Yeah, you're going on these like massive journeys, massive adventures. And for those who aren't familiar with ultra running, particularly, what these trail runs is, there are sometimes these races are self-supported. So you are supporting yourself. You have everything you need with you. Some of them have support areas, but there are long distances in between and you're navigating your way through that. It's interesting, you talk about being up against like terrain and weather and all of these variable things that you can't necessarily predict. But I'm wondering, what do you need to tap into mentally and in your mindset when you're out there on your own for hundreds of K or tens of K in the middle of nowhere? What goes on for you?
I think that was a difficult one to answer. And I think it's something I often think about because it's something I feel like I can't necessarily pinpoint myself. There's just something I just know if I just keep moving forwards, and it doesn't matter whether I'm crawling or walking or running, if I just move forwards, I'll reach the finish. Obviously, the confidence in that concept is not always the same, and it will vary from race to race. And some parts of the race, you'll really believe that, and other parts you might really struggle. Fundamentally, if you just keep reminding yourself of that, or I keep reminding myself of that, it will get better. It has to get better. I think there's an element of stubbornness as well. Like, I don't want to enter a race and not finish it. So even if that means I have to come last, I want to cross that finish line for myself. I can always go back and do it again if I feel like I want to try and perform. But I'm not exactly sure what it is or where it comes from. You choose to do these things. You choose to put yourself out there and you do the training for it. You control the controllables and you do the best you can. And the rest is kind of just happens to you when you're out there. And sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it sucks for 40 or 50K. And sometimes you're in incredible pain. And if you lose your mind, you're going to struggle to get it back and finish. Biggest thing is just to, even when it's hard, just to kind of keep moving forward, ticking off the kilometers or the miles, whichever one you want to use, and just believing, I think you can finish it regardless.
I always feel there are so many lessons that we can take from running into life. It's so true of running, but of also any challenges that we come up against, of this grit and determination that there will be times where you're putting one foot in front of the other, times that you are crawling. If you're wanting to get to that finish line, it's that utter self-belief. It's that keeping that mindset, throughout, that confidence, whether that's quiet confidence, whether that's like screaming loud, like I got this, that you can get there. The other thing that just so stood out to me is this, and this resonates with me when I've done trail races as well, is this complete letting go of what other people are doing. When you're really stripped bare, you're out there for hours and hours. Occasionally you might race to perform, And I know there are obviously elite people who that's their careers, but for the majority of us, we are racing ourselves. You know, you let go of like what anyone else is doing and it's just your race to run. And I think that is just so incredibly powerful to take forward with any running, whether it's, 5K, 10K, 100 miles or a goal in life. It's that determination and that mindset that is going to support you when other things might be challenging.
I think it is that resilience. I think just stubbornness as well. And I think you learn like each time you do a race, especially if it doesn't go well or you're not as prepared as you thought you were or conditions really challenge you. I think one thing ultra running does is you learn a lot about how much pain you can tolerate. My first 100-mile race, my feet were in bits and they were agony for at least 24 hours of the race. And I was out there for almost 45 hours. So for over half the race in pain, it would have been so easy to stop. But I think just having a stubbornness to just keep going, just keep pushing, just keep moving forwards. Two things. I mean, eventually the pain will dull. You'll get within what feels like sight, touching distance of the finish line. And that could still be 30 kilometers, but considering how far you've traveled, maybe the terrain gets easier. And that's what happened in that race is the last 2 checkpoints, 30K or so, the terrain got easier. They were sort of grassy, hilly mountains as opposed to rock, slaty, sort of scrabbly mountains and proper climbing. And, so they were easier on the feet and the sun had risen again and it was shining and, suddenly the pain dulls and you're close and you find a way to push again and to run again and to move again. And so seeing through the darker parts will always get you to a lighter part of the race. And then the next time you enter a race and something hurts, you have this undeniable proof it doesn't matter because you've been in pain before, probably worse, for longer. That's subsided. So you can manage, you can do it again. Stacking those things up can be really powerful long term. A race can go to shit and you can really suffer, but there's benefit in that suffering that if you can get through it, it will pay dividends later.
I love that. So you learn about yourself, that you have this incredible resilience. And there's also this flexing this metaphorical muscle of like knowing I've been here before, this pain, this challenge, and that belief that you can do it again. What else might you learn about yourself out on these races? And I think it's important as well for listeners for us to say that, Luke's just said he sometimes goes out for 40 plus hours. So you're going through the night. These are long old times out. So what else might you learn about yourself when you're out on these races?
I don't know. I'm a big believer in when times are hard in a race, you're suffering and things aren't going to plan and you can start to worry and you can start to think about quitting. And I think like quite often we're told to like think positive thoughts and dismiss those thoughts. And I don't know, I'm quite a big believer in like sitting with it and accepting that, knowing deep down that you're not going to do that, but allowing those thoughts to be there and just continuing regardless. I think that can be quite powerful because then when it does pass, for me, I think you're less likely to feel that way again within a race. I prefer to just kind of accept it, just get to the next checkpoint. It's not even a stay positive. I think it's just keep going. The positivity will come because it will pass and you'll feel better and you'll run again and things will be good. But yeah, just sitting with those feelings, I think is quite important, at least for me. I think one thing I've learned is like how beneficial having support is, whether that's a race which allows crew at certain checkpoints or throughout the race, or whether it's just someone popping up on course to say, yay, well done, keep going, or, to have a quick chat with you as you pass them slowly trudging up a hill or whatever, having someone there who supports you. And in turn, if they support you, they believe in you, I think is really, really powerful as well. And knowing, okay, I might have 20K to a checkpoint, but I'm probably going to see this person in 10 kilometers will be such a lift as well. It's just sort of a little beacon in the dark.
Yeah, so just to kind of go back to your journey. So you started this running journey with talking like 2020, 2021. You come into this space and you take on 100K and then that grows and you start to take on these bigger distance, but also like super varied terrain. I'm curious to know, like, what started to shift as you started to run more? Like, how did that impact in your life?
I think I enjoyed the experience so much. You're then looking for another one. And there's, like you said, there's so much variety. Like you can mountain ultras to kind of like, I guess like countryside ultras. They're less elevation, sort of more like hard packed ground, kind of grassy trails. Mountainous ones, coastal paths, you've probably got ones which go up volcanoes, you do all sorts of things. And I think like each one is different and presents a different challenge. I think the first ultra I did after the 100K was like a 54-kilometer race in Switzerland, and it had about 4,000 meters elevation gain. So that's quite a lot. I didn't really train for that. I did that just for the sheer enjoyment of it. And I really suffered in the back end of that because I'd never done so much climbing in my life, and my legs were just shot to pieces. That when we got to like the last 10K, which was all downhill and quite runnable, I was hobbling down. I had such a great time, and it was such a beautiful part of the world, and I learned a lot in terms of preparation, and I was buying all sorts of bits of kit last minute and things like that. But I think next was I came up to you and I did the half marathon Lady Bower. That went pretty well, although I forgot my bib number, so I had to drive back and I started in the last wave. Not an ultra race, but still on trail. So still, I think sort of 800 meters or so climbing, which is a couple of decent climbs in sort of 24, 25 kilometers. And that was really nice. And then I think I was sort of just looking for something, the next logical step, if you can call it logical, from sort of 100K and stuff, is the next jump is 100 miles. So with that same kind of naivety, I was like, well, why not?
I think, like, what else could you say instead of naivety?
Formulationist?
I was thinking more like utter self-belief.
Maybe I don't recognize it as that. Maybe in my mind, it's just kind of confidence masters naivety, or, what's the worst that's going to happen?
I think that's such a powerful, almost like beginner's mindset, not at all that you were a beginner runner, but, that recognition, like, I'm new to this distance, I'm new to this terrain. We don't need to necessarily start things to be fantastic at them. You talk a lot about like this utter joy that you feel and like the gratitude for just having done something. And so it's taking that and going like, okay, I want something bigger. Let's just do it because, you can, your body, allows you to with the training. And if I'm ever feeling demotivated, I'm thinking, God, I'm so lucky that I just physically can do some of these distances.
Mm-hmm.
I'm privileged enough to be able to get out there and do this. If I want to, then why the heck not?
It's important to prepare for these things as best you can. Obviously, being a city dweller in a relatively flat city, it can be difficult, but I think you just do your best and then you go and give it your best, and that's all you can do. As long as you enjoy yourself. That first 100 miles, I had the best time. I just had such a great time. And even with all the pain and how long I was out there and for, like we had freak weather, 24, 25 degrees, a little too hot because it's such an exposed route and you are out there for so long. It's billed as like one of the hardest races in the UK, Snowdonia. So 10,000 meters elevation gain over the course. You summit Snowdon twice as well as many other horrible peaks. I walked a lot of that race. It was incredibly hard, but I just had such a great time doing it. Anyone who's been to that part of the country knows that when the weather is good and the sun is shining and the clouds aren't there, you can just see for miles and it's absolutely stunning. The fact that I did struggle in that race and walk large parts of it meant that I got to really enjoy that, got to kind of really experience that. And I'm sure we were in parts of that national park area that you can only get to if you're on your feet. And that's kind of really special.
Amazing. Yeah, truly incredible. As you moved kind of through the last 5 years, I suppose, like building on these races and kind of running becoming this big part of your life, did you notice any ripple effects kind of outside of running into other parts of your life?
Yes and no. I think in a general sense, like a general kind of resiliency just to life and stress and things like that. It's tricky because I think I'm very good at applying the lessons I learned from running to running. I think I'm not very good at applying those things to the rest of my life. I don't really know why. I think running is just, it's you and it's only you. So regardless of the outcomes, ultimately it's you who is proud or you who feels let down by yourself. And I think often in the rest of life, whether it's true or not, so many other people are involved and there's so many other opinions and things affect other people or intersect with other people's lives, and it can be hard to apply those. I think I find it more difficult to apply the lessons I learned from running to my personal life. I think some of them probably happen fairly intuitively, like, that kind of resiliency to stress and pain and discomfort and stuff like that. I think happens fairly subconsciously. But I think the rest of it, hopefully, maybe it just takes longer. It's something I struggle with.
I noticed throughout the time that we talked together, you talked about this not being a singular defining moment and actually being more of a journey that you're on. And so I wonder whether there's an element of like some of this is still bedding in, your running journey as well as whatever else it might kind of ripple into your life is still, you're in the midst of it. And so from these experiences, from taking up running and taking on these huge distances, is there anything that you've had to kind of on the flip side unlearn or let go of?
No, I don't think so. I think the same way I've kind of always approached exercise has been the same way I've approached running. I think more recently, I've realized that running, and certainly these kind of distances and the kind of things I want to achieve, require structure and plans. So it's only this year that I've actually started to follow a plan for the first time. It's always been a bit of just consistently running, but kind of winging it. Maybe I need to unlearn winging it. Because I'm an organized person, I think in general, I like structure. And I think it's taken me a few years to start to apply that to this journey. And so maybe that's been a process of unlearning or a shift in my mindset. And I don't know, we could probably dig into why I haven't sort of looked to find structure in that further. I'm not too sure. But now that I have, I can see the benefits to it. It's not that I didn't know that it would have benefits, but for whatever reason, it was just, I don't know, maybe if you wing it and you don't perform that well, then there's a built-in excuse. But then maybe that's a load of rubbish as well. Or maybe because I'm looking to take on my biggest distance yet, I suddenly felt like, oh God, a bit of structure might be really useful now. Maybe that's something that when this process is further down the line, it might be more identifiable, or when my personal life matches more up with my passion, I might be able to see those things more clearly.
So tell us, what is the next thing coming up for you? What is this big distance, if you're happy to share?
So I'm running a race called Wild Horse 200, which is a 200-mile race, essentially across South Wales. It's not a straight line, it wiggles, it follows sort of established trails. It's a 200-mile race starting on Wednesday, the 21st of May, and you have until the Sunday, whatever day that is. It's not a stage race. You don't stop and sleep overnight and tackle a set distance each day. You run through until you're finished. You can sleep either in a crew vehicle or an aid station, but you have a maximum of 4 hours, starting from the moment you enter the aid station. So you might sleep for an hour or two. I still haven't figured that side of things out yet. It's a big unknown. I've done 2 overnight races. One was short enough that I didn't sleep at all. The other one was 2 nights and I slept for about 30 minutes within those 45 hours. But this is a different beast. There'll be some more substantial sleeping, but as and when and how that'll work, I'm not sure yet.
Huge challenge, but I have literally no doubt that you will tackle it with the determination and grit that you have all your other races. And I suppose to move us slightly on as we're coming to the end of our time, I just kind of wanted to share what's really stood out to me in what you've spoken about. And there's a couple of threads in your story, and there's something I've heard in you talking about, or I've sensed about you finding this purpose. That's hard, right? Like for a lot of us, for a lot of adults, we get into like our 30s and 40s and we still don't necessarily know what our thing is, and we don't necessarily have to have one singular thing. I definitely think I'm a master of none. But, I'm hearing that you found this thing that keeps you going, keeps you coming back to it. And also this, I've used these words a few times, this grit and determination to step into the unknown, to keep coming back, even when, coming out of your comfort zone, even when, building onto it. So taking on that first 10K, pulling that into your comfort zone, moving on, coming into, all the way up to now tackling these enormous distances, 200 miles across South Wales. It's just exceptional. And, a real valuable lesson for us to learn about the power of that stepping into the unknown, even when it's kind of scary and possibly we're winging it. I've got 2 final questions. My first final question is, why do you feel like this is a defining period for you?
I feel like it's given me a real focus in life. Often I think for a lot of people, focus means our work. For me, this hobby has been my focus. And how can I pull myself into that? How can I improve? How can I achieve the things I want to do? How can I push my limits? Where are my limits? I think that's been really, really good for me. Like the consistency in training has been really good for like mental health and just sort of stability in life. And there's kind of always a constant there. Running led me to meet my partner and to the life I have with her now. And I'm hopefully in this next chapter, running will also lead me to my work. I can't remember your question, but I hope that answers it.
I love that. I love that you got so lost in the answer that you forgot the question, because the question doesn't really matter. I think what you shared is incredible. And me, for one, I'm sure, many people listening and, the people around you are so excited to see where kind of running takes you next. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. Before we go, I have a question that I like to ask every guest, which is, what would you say to past you standing right on the edge of this defining moment?
When I think about that question, I see me standing next to me before taking up running. But when I look ahead, I see another me standing next to me at some point in this year, looking to do the same thing. Because I feel like I could be on the verge of running and this journey taking another turn to changing my life moving forwards. What that looks like, I'm not really too sure yet, but I think due to circumstances in my life, I've been pushed down that trajectory, and I think that's going to be a really good thing. I see that future me talking to me now, but if current me went back to speak to past me, just jump in with both feet, just follow it. Don't be scared, be naive and be courageous and brave and open, and kind of just give yourself to it, and it'll give you everything you're looking for, really. It's how I feel now. This could be the best thing that ever happened to you.
That's so powerful. What a powerful way to end for someone who said, I don't know, and then went on to say such incredibly powerful things. I don't know how we can top that. So all I will say is, yes, if we're taking anything away from today, jumping in with both feet, trusting oneself is the way forward. Yeah, thanks again, Luke. Look forward to hearing how the race goes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Define. I hope this story reminded you of your own strength, your own shifts, your own becoming. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and journey on.